119. This update has brought us many things, like the deep dark, mangrove swamps, a rework for birch forests, and fireflies? Wait, no, they scrapped those last two. But one thing they did include was the Skulk sensor, Minecraft's first intentional player detector. Although they also detect mobs. Well, I guess that makes sense. But they also detect when you break or place blocks, and when you open and close a chest, and when you eat, and when you drink, and when a piston fires, and when a note block plays, and when a projectile hits something, and when something takes damage, and bats, and when a wolf shakes out its fur, and… whoa, hold on a second, they detect bats? Why the hell did they detect bats? Well, it's time to make a bat farm, I guess? Is this really what my life has come to? On a more serious note, the Skulk sensor has some serious design flaws. This isn't a player sensor, it's an everything sensor. It listens out for sounds in an 8-block radius, and outputs a 2-second redstone pulse when it hears something. And in case you're curious, here's a list of everything it reacts to. Literally, someone could let rip the tiniest fart in a parallel universe, and it would probably set this thing off. It's like when you damage your headset cable and it starts doing that horrible high-pitched ringing. This thing is a magnet for interference. I think Mojang tried making this one block do way too much without really knowing when to stop. There's that whole saying that less is more, which definitely applies here. Now the idea is that it detects sound waves, which is a nice idea on paper, but for actual gameplay and using the block, it's a terrible design choice, unless there's something to keep it in check. So in an attempt to solve this problem, Mojang introduced one of my least favorite mechanics in all of Minecraft: Skulk frequencies. If you point a comparator away from the Skulk sensor, each sound source will give a different signal strength. So now we have a way of separating the different sound sources. But to actually make use of this, you need additional redstone, like this. This circuit only lets power through if it has a signal strength of 1, which is what walking does. So this is a walking detector. If we try anything else, the power gets blocked because the signal strength isn't 1. So purple, what are you complaining about then? It seems to be working just fine.
Wrong.
Imagine I have a storage room with a door hooked up to a Skulk sensor. First, I open some chests. The sensor hears this, and the circuit blocks its pulses. Then I walk towards the door. Oh, it doesn't open. So what happened there was the pulses were blocked, but the sensor still went on cooldown, and that cooldown is rather long, so it's not listening out for my footsteps when I actually want it to. And don't forget, the door itself can also put the sensor on cooldown, because there are pistons in it. So to combat this, Mojang added another mechanic: Muffling. This lets you use wool to block sounds from reaching the sensor, but this doesn't really solve anything. You can't put wool between the sensor and the pistons without also blocking your footsteps, the very thing we're trying to detect. And if you smother the sensor with wool to block the chest noises, then you've just made it less responsive. You now have to walk a very specific path towards the door to actually open it. And if you instead try moving the Skulk sensor further down, well, now the sound has to travel further, so there's more input delay. So you always smack your face into the door trying to open it, even with a really fast door like this one. This is literally worse than the automatic doors at the supermarket. There are a couple things I do like about the Skulk sensor though. Of course, I like that it has the potential to replace ugly pressure plate inputs, despite the flaws I pointed out. But I also like that it has odd game tick delays. What the hell does that mean? Well, in redstone timings, almost every redstone component has delays in multiples of 2 game ticks. Repeaters go 2, 4, 6, and 8, observers and torches have 2, droppers and dispensers have 4. You get the idea. These are all even delays, and there's lots of them. There aren't many ways of getting odd delays. Before 119, odd numbers were only possible with pistons, leaves, or scaffolding, and that was it. And the last two aren't even redstone components. They don't power stuff directly. The sound waves for Skulk sensors travel at 1 block per game tick, so for an odd delay, you just need the right distance. Having more ways to do stuff like this is pretty much always a good thing, though unfortunately, the current state of Skulk sensors cancels out any good sides they have. Their functionality is so bloated that you always have to accept some kind of drawback. No other redstone component has this problem to this extent. You could argue that just the idea of Skulk sensors is OP, so Mojang tried to balance them, but here's the thing. In balancing them, they've also made them basically useless. Also, the Skulk frequencies mechanic is really janky. For example, eating has a signal strength of 8, and drinking a potion has a signal strength of 7, but then drinking milk goes to 14, and drinking honey goes to 8. The same as eating. Honey is classified as a drink, and if I tap right-click on any of these, they all go to 14. There's no consistency here at all. Also, in the bat farm, I didn't actually use the signal strength for bats. If I use an actual bat detector, it's almost always locked out, because they trigger footsteps far more often, which puts the sensor on cooldown so it doesn't listen out for the actual bat sounds. And another thing, if there's any entity on top of a Skulk sensor, it pulses endlessly without hearing any sounds. And it's been this way ever since Mojang fixed players being able to sneak on top of Skulk sensors. Now, all this harsh criticism probably makes it sound like I despise this block. So just to make it clear, I don't hate the Skulk sensor. I love the idea, I just think it's really poorly executed, and I want it to be better. So this is how I, as a redstoner, would go about fixing it. And feel free to make your own suggestions in the comments. First of all, I would make 2 versions of the Skulk sensor, just like how there's 2 versions of the Shrieker, the naturally generated version and the player-placed version. This way, we can make changes to the new one without affecting how it naturally behaves in the deep dark. Change number 2, I would shorten the pulse length to 2 game ticks. In the deep dark, it makes sense for it to be 2 seconds long. If you accidentally trigger the sensor, there's a grace period before it triggers again. But in Redstone, there is no reason to have a pulse this long by default. A 2 game tick pulse is far more usable. If needed, the cooldown afterwards could be slightly longer, but it really shouldn't be any more than 8 game ticks. Change number 3, remove all unnecessary triggers, because this is where the majority of the bloat comes from. It doesn't need to detect everything, like pistons and tripwire hooks. Removing these would also let us add some things that the Skulk sensor probably should detect. And speaking of frequencies, change number 4, overhaul the Skulk frequencies. This feature is so temperamental and requires additional redstone to work properly, which adds more input delay. It would be far better if you could right-click the Skulk sensor like a note block to select the frequency you want. This way, we're no longer limited by redstone dust to just 15 Skulk frequencies, so we can also spread things out more. It also means we won't have any more issues with one mob triggering multiple frequencies, and the Skulk sensor having to decide which one to do. Change number 5, it should strong power the blocks directly next to it, so you can properly encase it in wool. The fact that you can't currently do this is one of the main flaws with the muffling mechanic. It doesn't work very well with the block that it's designed for. Change number 6 is probably the least likely to happen, but it would be really nice if the Skulk sensor was movable. It has a lot of potential not just for doors and farms, but for flying machines as well, but the fact that it isn't movable is holding it back. It's not even movable in Bedrock Edition, which has some movable block entities. All these changes basically turn the Skulk sensor into a wireless observer, but it's not quite as good as an actual observer. Yes, it's a significant buff. Yes, it might seem really dumbed down, but trust me, it's far better than what we have now. And at the end of the day, these are just suggestions. We can't know for sure without actually testing and iterating things. Maybe Mojang will fix it, maybe they won't, but for now, I'm gonna stick to using my pressure plates. Huge thanks to Denkill5, King Parity, and Tom and Jerry 342 for being patrons this month. And by the way, 86% of my viewers aren't subscribed. So, subscribe?